Welcome to Movie Recap. In today's video, we will be going through the 2010 action, adventure, fantasy movie Clash of the Titans. Turn on subtitles and spoilers ahead. A long time ago, the Titans ruled the earth before they were men and gods. However, despite being powerful, their reign was ended by their own sons, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. Zeus then convinced Hades to create a beast that could defeat their parents, and from his own flesh, Hades gave birth to the Kraken. After that, Zeus became the king of the heavens while Poseidon ruled the sea. Unfortunately, Hades was tricked by Zeus, and so the Underworld was left in his hands. Then Zeus created men, and men's prayers fed the gods' immortality. However, men soon became restless and started questioning the gods, eventually rising up against them. Meanwhile, somewhere in the middle of the sea, a fisherman named Spyros finds a coffin floating in the water. He then takes it into his boat and discovers a baby boy inside. But the infant's mother is already dead, so Spyros takes the child and prepares to go home to raise him as his own. On the other hand, the child's guardian, Lo, watches them from afar, and she names the baby Perseus. 12 years later, Perseus becomes a strong man and makes sure to help his parents in everything they do, especially catching fish. Unfortunately, the gods didn't bless him with a glorious bounty, and Spyros can't help but feel angry. Then that night, Perseus feels restless as his father tells him how the storm brought them together. Spyros is sure that Perseus has questions for him about his identity, but Perseus makes it clear that it doesn't matter to him. The next day, Perseus and his family witness several soldiers from Argos destroy the statue of Zeus. Unfortunately, because of that, Hades orders his harpies to kill the soldiers before finally showing himself. Hades then destroys Spyros' boat and causes them to sink, and Perseus fails to save his family. Meanwhile, in Olympus, the gods start to argue about how they should deal with the mortals. Zeus is enraged that humans dare to defy him, but he refuses to offer them a truce. Then, Hades shows up and points out the humans have grown strong because of Zeus's love. At the same time, Hades offers to punish the humans because they're now a threat to them, and despite being initially reluctant, Zeus allows his brother to do what he wants. On the other hand, the surviving soldiers of Argos take Perseus back to their city. There, Perseus faces King Cephas and Queen Cassiopeia, who brazenly disrespect the god. However, Andromeda is much different from her parents, wishing only for peace and safety of their people. Unfortunately, Cassiopeia no longer fears the gods and even says that Andromeda is more beautiful than Aphrodite. She also arrogantly compares themselves to God, angering Hades and causing him to wreak havoc on the place. But despite the chaos, Hades finds it interesting that Perseus isn't harmed at all. Remembering what Hades did to his family, Perseus tries to exact revenge on him, but there's no match for the gods of the Underworld. Still, Perseus once again attempts to fight Hades, but Lo shows up and tells him that he'll have his chance someday. Then Hades ages Cassiopeia to death and tells everyone that he realized that Kraken in 10 days, adding that sacrificing the princess is the only thing that will save them. Unfortunately, before Hades leaves, Perseus learns from him that Zeus is his father. Meanwhile, Hermes informs Zeus that there's a demigod in Argos. Hermes tells Zeus that Perseus is his son and thinks of offering him sanctuary, but the gods of heavens refuse. Back in Argos, Draco and his soldiers force Perseus to reveal his identity. Then, King Cephas asks Perseus to save them, since he believes that he's the son of Zeus. But Perseus tells him that he's just a man. Naturally, the king refuses to sacrifice his daughter, so Draco suggests that they get the princess out of the city. However, Perseus points out that no one can hide from Hades. Later on, Lo visits Perseus and reveals that she guided him to his family. Perseus wants to know if she's a god, so Lo says that she was cursed with agelessness after refusing a god's advance. At the same time, Perseus asks if he's really the son of Zeus, and then when Lo tells him the story of his birth, years ago, King Arceus led a siege on Olympus after growing tired of his god's mistreatment and cruelty. Because of that, the other gods wanted to lay waste to Arceus and his army. But Zeus had other plans. Disguised as Arceus, Zeus visited the king's wife and slept with her. Arceus then ordered the execution of his wife and her newborn son, enraging Zeus and causing him to strike the king with lightning. Since then, Lo has washed over Perseus. She says that he was born to kill the Kraken, but the only thing Perseus can't think about is getting back at Hades. So, Lo reveals that if Kraken falls, Hades will be weak enough for Perseus to strike a deathly blow. Moments later, Perseus prepares to join Draco and the other soldiers in searching for Stygian witches, who know exactly how to kill the Kraken. They are then joined by the brothers Ozal and Kukuk, who are both monster hunters. Meanwhile, Procopion stands quietly among the crowd, wondering what will happen to their city. On the other hand, Hades visits Arceus, who now calls himself Calibos. Hades informs Calibos that Zeus' son with his wife survived, pointing out that the king killed the woman he loved for nothing. Hades says that Zeus is unaware that he's growing stronger, but until he possesses his full power, he wants Calibos to be his weapon. So Hades grants power to disfigured Calibos and orders him to kill Perseus. And in return, the god of the Underworld promises to destroy Zeus for him. Meanwhile, Perseus' group stays in the wood to get some rest. Then Draco teaches Perseus how to hold a sword and fight, intentionally making fun of him. So Perseus proves that he's not as useless as he thinks, and Draco advises him to bring the god in him once they fight. After that, Perseus finds a sword in the woods and starts wielding it. However, upon learning from Draco that it's a gift from the gods, Perseus refuses to accept it. Perseus says that he can complete his mission as a man, tossing the sword to Draco before finally walking away. But despite Perseus' stubbornness, Draco still instructs his men to retrieve their savior. Concurrently, Perseus can't help but be amazed when a beautiful winged horse, Pegasus, comes to him. Lo claims that no one has ever ridden that magnificent creature, adding that it's a message from the gods. On the other hand, the soldiers looking for Perseus are killed by Calibos, and it isn't long before he comes after the demigod. Unfortunately, as they fight, Calibos mercilessly bites Perseus' arm. He also easily kills the other soldiers, and he only stops when Draco cuts off his hand. Then Calibos is forced to flee when the soldiers show unity against him, but Perseus has no intention of letting him escape. Once Perseus runs after Calibos, the other men quickly follow him. However, they're unaware that Calibos' severed hand has started turning into a scorpion. Then the brothers finally catch up to Calibos and manage to hit him, but they soon realize that the disfigured man's blood is giving birth to scorpions in the sand. Shortly after that, the soldiers fight against the giant scorpions. Most of them are immediately killed, and Perseus gets pinned against a pillar. Luckily, Lo saves him from the scorpion, but the monster soon comes after him. Moments later, Draco and Perseus finally kill the two scorpions, but their nightmare isn't over yet. It isn't long before more scorpions show up to kill the men. However, a group of deserted conjurers called the Demigod shows up and paralyzes the scorpions, making Perseus wonder who they are. Solon then tells him that they were once humans, but Perseus doesn't mind and just wants to thank them. Unfortunately, he doesn't even manage to approach their rescuers, for the venom from Calibos' bite suddenly spreads throughout his body. Perseus then collapses and writhes in pain. And when Draco tells him to pray to Zeus for strength, he vehemently refuses. Back in Argos, Andromeda tries her best to tend to people's needs. She then goes to the plaza and listens to Procopion, who asks everyone to turn their hearts to Hades. He wants the people to understand that sacrificing Andromeda is the only way to save their city, and he even burns his hand to prove he's now loyal to Hades. Meanwhile, Draco and the other survivors lay their fallen comrades into rest. On the other hand, Solon explains to Eusebius that the scorers replace their limbs with charwood and black magic, then they get injured in battle. Solon also adds that they feel no pain and they can live for hundreds of years, but he makes it clear that he doesn't trust them. Moments later, the Demigod leader uses black magic on Perseus' wound. Of course, Draco and Solon quickly try to stop him, but the sorcerer reveals that he wants to help Perseus because he knows that he's the only one who will free them from the gods. Sure enough, Perseus comes out of his tent as his arms heals, and that's when they all realize that they must work together. Later on, Draco comes at Perseus for refusing the sword from Zeus, saying that his pride is killing their men, but despite that, Perseus still insists on doing everything as a man. So Draco reminds him that he's not just a man, telling him that he'll keep his sword until he decides to use it. Then the sorcerers start controlling the scorpions, which they use to travel across the desert. After a few days, Perseus' group finally reaches the Garden of Stygia, where the Kraken defeated the Titans. Then Perseus wastes no time and quickly asks the witches how to defeat the Kraken. But the hags demand payment for answering his questions and start attacking everyone. So Perseus takes their eye and threatens to get rid of it if they don't say how to defeat the Kraken, forcing the witches to mention Medusa, whose gaze will kill anything of flesh. The witches then tell him that they can find Medusa across the river, Styx. But as the man prepared to leave, the hags reveal to Perseus that he is destined to die. After that, Dinchen, except for the leader, decide to leave Perseus' group. Meanwhile, Zeus visits Perseus and offers him sanctuary because he knows that the Kraken and Hades can't be defeated. Zeus also wants Perseus to come with him to Olympus, but the sun simply refuses his offer. So Zeus gives him a golden drachma, telling him that it's expensive where they're going. Moments later, the monster hunters give Perseus a shield and inform that they're leaving too. Despite that, Perseus still leads the others to the Underworld, where they use the drachma as a bribe for the ferryman to get them across the river. Then, while on boat, Lo reveals that Athena cursed Medusa after being violated by Poseidon. Medusa thought that the goddess would protect her, but Athena was disgusted and made sure that no one would ever want her again. Unfortunately, anyone who looks at Medusa will turn into a stone. And since only men are allowed at the temple, Lo tells everyone that she can't assist them there. Upon reaching Medusa's lair, Perseus reminds the soldiers to keep their eyes out. Unfortunately, they soon get ambushed by Medusa, and they immediately lose Solon. Meanwhile, Draco becomes weak after getting hit by an arrow, and orders Isis and Eubysus to flank the Gorgon. However, Medusa easily turns Axis into a stone, and it isn't long before she claims Eubysus too. Sadly, Perseus doesn't even have the time to grieve. He quickly needs to find a way to kill Medusa. Perseus then instructs the Dingen leader to get ready while he distracts Medusa, making the Gorgon chase him around. Unfortunately, the sorcerer only scats Medusa when he tries to kill her, but the Gorgon fails to turn him into a stone. So the Dingen leader self-destructs and manages to injure Medusa, and Draco makes sure to trap her by impaling her body on the ground, even if it means sacrificing his life. With no time to waste, Perseus uses the underside of the shield to see where Medusa is before closing his eye and beheading her. Then, Perseus takes Medusa's severed head and leaves the Underworld, only to witness Lo getting stabbed by the Calibos. Enraged, Perseus fights Calibos, but his sword unexpectedly breaks, so he finally decides to use Zeus's gift and stab Calibos, but he doesn't expect the disfigured man to return to his normal appearance. Then, before falling off the cliff, Calibos tells Perseus not to become one of the gods. After that, Perseus quickly tends to Lo. Unfortunately, Lo is already dying, so she urges Perseus to head to Argos before it's too late. She also assures Perseus that everything will be alright, and she disappears. Pegasus suddenly shows up. Taking that as his cue to mark a move, the son of Zeus gathers his weapons and rides to the majestic creature of Argos. Meanwhile, Zeus eventually instructs Hades to release the Kraken. So Procopion leads the people of Argos to take Andromeda and sacrifice her to the monster, but the princess voluntarily surrenders. Procopion then has Andromeda tied by the wrists and offered to the Kraken, but it still proceeds to destroy the city. On the other hand, Hades finally shows his true colors and admits to Zeus that he only serves himself. Hades still resents Zeus for sending him to the Underworld, and he makes it clear that his brother's reign is over now. At the same time, Hades wants Zeus to suffer as the Kraken kills his beloved humans, but the god of the heavens reminds him that there's still a demigod in Argos. As Kraken lays waste in the city, Perseus finally arrives to kill the monster. However, Hades orders his harpies to stop Perseus, and he eventually loses a bag containing Medusa's head. So Perseus does his best to retrieve the head, and it isn't long before the monster hunter shows up to help kill the harpies. Moments later, Perseus finally manages to kill the harpy that stole Medusa's head. Then he quickly takes the head and shows it to Kraken before it eats Andromeda, causing it to turn into a stone. On the other hand, Procopion tries to kill Perseus after witnessing what he did, so King Kephis stops him. Enraged, Procopion stabs the king, but they are both ended up by getting crushed by the Kraken's claw. Meanwhile, Hades stops Perseus from saving Andromeda while she falls into the water. At the same time, he tells Perseus that he can be killed since he's a god, so Perseus uses his Olympian sword to send him back to the Underworld. Then Perseus quickly rescues Andromeda, who later suggests that they rule the Argos together. However, Perseus refuses, saying that he can serve her better as a man before finally leaving. Later on, Zeus visits Perseus and reminds him that Hades will soon return once the men grow weak. He also asks Perseus to take his place in Olympus, but once again, Perseus refuses. Defeated, Zeus resurrects Lo to express his gratitude, and for the first time, Perseus immediately accepts his father's gift. Thanks for watching! Please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to get new movie recaps.